Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to be in the Lord's house. Great to see each and every person who's come out. And even though it's been a little rainy today, great to be in the Lord's house. The S-O-N, Jesus, is always shining. And we can so glad that we had that opportunity to serve Him. Looking forward to a great study in the Word tonight. Brother Rick, glad he's back with us again tonight. Appreciate those watching by Facebook, Internet, YouTube, listening on the dial-up. Appreciate all of you. Just an announcement or two of the activities the rest of the week. Friday and Saturday, men's conference in Lynchburg. Saturday, over at Macedonia Church of Christ, it's a men's retreat that starts at 8 o'clock. March 16th, ladies' Bible study here at church at 10. Then the 17th is an annual meeting after services. 17th to the 20th of March, revival at Springville. Paul Ponchant is going to be the preacher there. 21st to the 23rd, revival at Oak Grove on White Mountain. Different speakers every night. March the 24th, Brother Rick will be back with us during Sunday morning, showing the camp video during the Sunday school hour and then preaching in the morning service. Annual Ladies' Day, April the 6th at Macedonia from 9 to noon. And then on the 20th, the Ladies' Day at Midway. And is that 9 o'clock registration? Is it 9 o'clock? And then April the 26th, the men's clinic at Christian Acres. And Brother Mike Wright is going to be preaching registration. And it starts about 5. And then meal to follow. And then singing and preaching and fellowship and a lot of fun. Just praising the Lord together. All right, we'll begin our song service. We'll use this as our prayer song as well. So if you have a prayer need tonight, fill out that prayer card and forward to the inside aisle. We'll use number 652, Jesus Saves, and we'll sing verses 1, 3, and 4 of this song. Aren't we glad He does? 9:45, kneel at the cross. That'll be our song of invitation tonight. 945. To our prayer list tonight, quite a few. The family of Bert Severt be traveling from Florida to Grundy tomorrow. Family of Zach Boyd. Brother Johnny Stacy has a lung infection. Also, to remember in prayer, Valerie Roberts doing radioactive iodine for her thyroid, so pray for her. Also, glad Sister Ada's procedure went well on her eyes. Thank you for that. Also, Carol Mullins, this is Rhonda Niece's aunt. She fell today. When we were there, they hadn't found any broken bones as of yet, so continue to pray for her. Daniel Pilkins, Keith Beavers, looking to get a kidney transplant. Richard Hicks, ask us to keep him in prayer. Also, I said, Carol Mullins. Bernard Sparks was able to go home and still quite a bit of coughing, congestion from this double pneumonia, so pray for him. Sister Jean, Amy Hunter, battling cancer, member at the Borderview Christian Church in Elizabethton, Tennessee. Cameron Jesse, under the weather. Stella Day and their family. She's battling lung cancer. Rita Cox, looking at back surgery. Sister Kelly France, old Howard Puckett on dialysis and other issues. Very special unspoken request tonight. The Lord knows what that need is, but a special request has been made for prayer. Bev Sargent, she is still in ICU, but she's doing much better today. And in fact, she was getting ready to eat while we was up, so thankful for that. Sister Paula Stiltner's had tests already this week and tests tomorrow. Pray for her. Chris Chittum, foot surgery on March the 8th. Roberta Gillespie, her shoulder. Lauren Casey, this is Wade and Cookie's granddaughter, flying home yesterday. Brother Michael Lee has some additional surgery tomorrow to finish removing this cyst, and they'll do that down at the hospital. So pray for him. Milford Roberts, Prudale's, he's doing a whole lot better. Thankful for that. Martha Compton, Keith Morris, kidney and liver issues. The Betty Ketron family, this is Sister Linda Glover's sister-in-law. That service was Sunday afternoon, so continue to pray for the family. Sister Beth Sisk, flu. Robin Cunningham, going to Duke, battling cancer. Jennifer Honaker, it's an automobile accident. Brother Jack Statzer, we learned Sunday, has COVID. Autumn Powers, continue to keep Sister Jenny Hagee and the family in prayer. Joanne Rife, battling breast cancer. Mary Stacy, kidneys shutting down. This is Joanne Rife's daughter. Also, Ellen Alford, battling a stomach virus. All their family is. Sister Emily Witt has COVID. How's she doing? Doing better? Wonderful. Wonderful. Mike Blankenship lost his mother. Wayne Matney, battling cancer. This is Gay Arm's brother. Eddie Colley, Blake Addison, Nancy Dotson, of course, our wife Ruth, she's traveling in North Carolina. Pamela Curry, Missy Hammonds having tests. Keith Morris, kidney problems. Sister Betty Knoll. Also, continue to pray, as we said, for the Ruth Norman family. This is Jenny's sister, and Kaya Dales, Mike and Edie Dales. So a lot of names remembered in prayer today. And we know that there's many more. God knows them all. We may not know the names, but the Lord does, and that's what matters. So let's go to the Lord in prayer. And Brother Charlie Cooper, would you lead us? .45 will be our song of invitation, and turn it over to Brother Rick.
Evening, everybody. Turn in your handout booklet, if you would, to page 21. For those of you online, we've had some of them order these books already. I sent one down to Bob's friend and his wife down in Florida and everything else. Tonight we're not going to review what we studied last week. We're just going to get right into the 7 churches. Now, all of you tonight, when you came in, received one of these papers. If you would, I'd like you to get that out. I wanted to give you a quick introduction. On mine at the office, I had the introduction on the overhead, but on this one here that I gave Gene back there, it's not there, so I'm just going to quickly review it. Some people, when they approach the 7 churches, say that, and this is the view I hold, they are 7 literal churches to whom John wrote the book of Revelation. Some people interpret the 7 churches as 7 distinct church periods. And these are the folks who say you can trace them down through history, and we're now living in the Laodicean age. And there is some truth to that, but these are not 7 church periods. These are 7 literal churches. However, the third view is that each of these churches, while they do not represent church ages, do represent problems that all churches are going to face. And I think there's truth in that. Now, each of these 7 churches has 7 distinct divisions. So get this little paper out I handed you. First of all, there's a hello, the dear. We say, Dear John. If your name's John, I apologize. I know you've gotten a lot of letters, Dear John. Normally that's from your girlfriend that says, I don't want anything to do with you any longer. But he will say, unto the church of unto the angel of the church at Ephesus and Smyrna and Pergamos and Thyatira. This is the hello to each of the churches. Then there is a designation of Christ to each of these churches taken from the vision we saw in last week. Remember the ascended glory of Christ? He had that garment down to the foot. He was our high priest, prophet, and king. All that. Well, from that vision, each of the churches will have a designation of Christ to that church. Then, to 6 of the 7 churches, there is a commendation. Hello? Now, this is a good principle for you to follow. If you've got to talk to somebody about a problem they've got in their life, a sin they've got in their life, it's always good to start by saying, here's something I like about you, but, and you'll see that same principle. And then he'll come back, and in many cases, he'll compliment them again. So we always say, sandwich your bad remarks in between the good things that you can say about someone. That's a good way to start, because if you start with a negative, they'll never hear anything else you say. So there is a commendation to 6. Why not to Laodicea, the last one? There wasn't anything good to say about them. This is the church that made Jesus sick. He threw it up. Then there is a condemnation. Now notice that only 5 of the 7 slots on your paper are a condemnation, because there are 2 good churches, Smyrna and Philadelphia, about which he said nothing bad. Then there is this warning. Hey, if you don't straighten up, especially if I've condemned you, I'm going to come and, in one case, I'm going to come and knock your lights out. Okay? Then there is an exhortation. You ought to do this. Let us do this. And then there is the promise. Now, when I do the Second Coming seminar, I have a sermon entitled, To Him That Overcometh, the 7 promises to the church. And we'll get into one of those probably next week. So I hope you'll appreciate this. If I told some of you when I handed this out, if you were in my class at Bluefield, then when I taught the book of Revelation in the classroom, college classroom, they would have to fill this out on their own. So you can thank the students who did this beforehand, because all I did was copy what they already had done and add to it and maybe correct it a little bit. But you have this, and I hope you'll use this as we go down through the churches. So our approach is going to be that each time we do the churches, then I will give you a little bit of background to it. So the first church, of course, that he writes to is Ephesus. Now, if you'll turn one page back in your booklet, I think it's one page backlit. Here is the picture of the churches and where they are. So John is writing to the first church, that a person who is delivering the letter from the Isle of Patmos, that would be the first church that he came to, the church at Ephesus. So let's give you a little bit about historical background. And there is the depiction on the overhead of where the church at Ephesus is located. So here's our background. The church at Ephesus contained one of the 7 wonders of the world. Does anybody know what that was? It was the Temple of Diana. Now, if you want some pictures of that, here is one depiction of it. Now, this temple in your handout booklet says it was 425 feet long. So let's just take a football field. A football field, the length of the football field, not including the end zones, is what? 100 feet, 100 feet. So 100 yards, that'd be 300 feet. So this was basically a football field and a half long, okay? Now, a football field is 60 feet wide, 60 yards wide. So that's 180 feet. The building was 220 feet, so it's basically double the width of a football field, twice as long as a football field. Notice it had 120 columns. Here's another depiction of it, that were 120 feet tall. So if you were to see a building in this area downtown that was 120 feet tall, we'd say that every floor is just say 10 feet, right? So this is a 12-story building in that day and time. So this is a pretty gigantic thing. Now, who in the world is Diana? Well, she's the Playboy of her day and time. She's the Playboy magazine of her day and time. Now, I could not dare show you this up close because in some situations I have young children here. But if you want to get on your website and type in the little figurines that the silversmith was making, if you go visit this, what's left of this temple today, they'll still sell you as a tourist these pictures of a woman who is breast from head to toe. So I gave it in the background there. You can see that picture. That's as close as up as what I wanted to share with you. Now you remember that when Paul was in this city, it was in this amphitheater here in the city of Ephesus. Remember, he wrote a book to the church. It's entitled Ephesians, right? So biblically, Paul stayed here the longest, 3 years. He sent Timothy here to be the preacher after he left, established the church. It's also in Acts 20:17 that Paul, now this is important, calls the elders from the Miletus down to the coastline, and he has a tearful goodbye with them. Now, what did he encourage those elders to watch out for? With tears, he cried with those elders. You make sure you keep the church pure doctrinally. I don't believe they ever forgot this. Even though this is 30-some years later, they never, ever forgot that Paul was here. So remember that when he was preaching here, they had a great big revolt that rose up against Paul's preaching because they thought he preached against gods made with hands. Now that's stupid, isn't it? That you could make a god and this little image of Diana, the goddess of sex. Guess what went on in the temple to honor her? It was basically the Las Vegas brothel of its day and time. So here was the city that was full of immorality, and when Paul preached there be no gods made with hands, then they got in there and cried out for how many hours? A couple hours, didn't they? Great is Diana, god of Ephesians. They believed she came down from heaven. And here, all the people from all over the world came to worship her. There were prostitutes who were hired to service the men, and there were even male prostitutes to serve the women who came to worship. And boy, if you don't believe politics in this case, like our football games, you always have the commercials of some pretty-looking woman half dressed, and this is people that would come all over the world just to have relations, immoral relations with the gigolos, I guess we'd say, and the prostitutes in this temple. So don't ever forget the background, and I would encourage you maybe to go home and read the book of Ephesians, and you'll see what Paul refers to there. So now let's go to the book, and let's see what he writes to this church. John writes to the church, the first church of the 7 to whom he wrote in Revelation chapter 2. So he says, and I'm reading from the King James Version, "Unto the angel of the church in Ephesus write, These things saith he that holdeth the 7 stars in his right hand." And what do we find in chapter 1? What was the 7 stars? He said the 7 stars, back in verse 20, just the verse preceding this, are the angels of the 7 churches. Remember, we discussed those last week. My preference is these are the leaders, maybe the elders of the church, the ones who are entrusted with the message, and who walks in the midst of the 7 golden candlesticks. We said last week, this is Jesus. He hadn't gone off to heaven and forgot about it. He sees every problem that every one of us, including the church at Ephesus to whom he wrote, he's with us, and he knows every problem we're going through. So this is the designation of Christ. So the next part on your sheet that I handed you was, here is the commendation. "I know your works and your labor and your patience." Now, what's the difference between working and laboring? We would say working is just doing the regular stuff. But when you labor, that's hard stuff. That's doing hard time. That's getting the sledgehammer and beating the rocks in two. They labor. So they're working for Jesus, and they're doing it in a great way, aren't they? They're just not working. They're working hard for the Lord, and the patience. And here's the other compliment. "And you cannot bear them which say they are, cannot bear them which are evil, and you have tried them which say they are apostles and are not, and have found them liars." So, remember that tearful goodbye? What's going to happen? These people never forgot that tearful, the last time they would ever see Paul on the earth. And they remembered, he said, you watch out for people that are going to come in among you teaching perverse things. So where is the test in the Bible for false prophets? Well, one of the tests that was used was in 1 John chapter 4, another book that John also wrote, 1 John 4, 1 through 3. So let's read it together. He says, "Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world. Hereby know ye the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is of God. And every spirit that confesses not that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is that spirit of Antichrist." Now, how many of you have ever heard of the Antichrist? I guess when I teach this, probably more people ask me, "Oh, the Antichrist, that's the one coming. Oh, in the 7 years of tribulation that you can't find anywhere in the Bible, but that's the Antichrist. Supposedly he is a one-world government that after the church has been raptured away, according to them, he plays favors with the Jews during that 7 years of tribulation. He rebuilds the temple in Jerusalem." You ever heard that? I remember when I was a kid, I heard Billy Graham preach that. Boy, when they laid that foundation for that temple, you better get ready because Jesus is coming. Well, he says here, "And this is that spirit of Antichrist, where have you heard that it should come, and even now already it is in the world." You got that? In the first century. So don't worry about a one-world government to come. Anybody who is opposed to Christ doctrinally or says that Jesus really doesn't care about it, why would God care about it? He needs to send Jesus in the flesh. Baloney. That was the test. Now, this is probably written against the Gnostics. These were the Gentile converts who came in church. First of all, the Jewish were the converts. Remember the Romans 1:16, the gospel is the power of God unto salvation to the Jew first. So they had the privilege, because they brought Jesus forth, they had the privilege of being the first Christians, even though they were not called that until Acts chapter 10. And the reason they weren't called Christians, they were simply called disciples. In other words, they were called Mathenas. That's my name, Greek word for disciples. They were called Mathenas for the first several years of the church. But in Acts chapter 10, you have the Gentiles added in, right? Now the prophecy in Isaiah 62:2 and Isaiah 65:15, when the Gentiles see thy righteous, then the mouth of the Lord would call his people by a new name. And that divinely given name is the name Christian. I hate to see people today say, oh, Christ followers. Well, that's the modern thing, but Christian is the God-given name, and I think since God is the one who spoke it, we ought to use it instead of Christ followers. Christ followers basically is the same word for disciple. So the Jews were the first, and they bought in their philosophy that in order to become a Christian, you first of all had to become a circumcised Jew, and we had to have the Jerusalem Council in the book of Acts held to solve that problem. They added another step to the plan of salvation. Well, the second converts in the church were the Gentiles after Acts chapter 10. And when they came in, they bought some of their philosophy called Gnosticism. Now, that's just a big old long word meaning the know-it-alls. And the idea of the Gnostics, by the way, the modern day Gnostics are this E. Ron Hubbard and Dianetics. The modern Gnostics are the Christian Scientists. And they deny that I'm sitting here tonight in this chair and you're sitting here bored to death. They say everything's just in your mind. Even Adam and Eve weren't real people. That's just philosophies. And so how did Jesus come in the world? Well, he only seemed to be flesh, but he really wasn't. And that's the doctrine of docetism, Docetism, the belief that he only seemed or appeared. That's the Greek word. It just means seen. He only seemed to be flesh. He only appeared to be flesh. And so John 1:1 and the whole book of 1 John is written to prove to you that Jesus was physical. In the first chapter, he said, we saw him, we held him, we touched him. He was the one in the beginning. So when these people came in, they said, well, Jesus was the one who wanted us to concentrate on the mind, deny the flesh. And so they believed that flesh was evil, therefore you couldn't eat meat. Y'all remember a whole time period? Some of you are old enough to remember when the Catholics could only eat fish on Friday. And that goes back to Gnosticism. And I don't understand how fish is not a meat, but they said it wasn't. And Bruce is a former Catholic altar boy, so he can tell you all this, that what I'm telling you is the truth. And you wouldn't eat eggs. Why not? Because that's a reproduction of flesh. You wouldn't even marry. Because if you married and had a child, you're imprisoning another soul in a human body. And the ideal is to escape your flesh, denying it. So you've heard of people who sleep on nails. You've heard of that. That's an Eastern religion. Well, that's Gnosticism. That flesh is evil, spirit is good, and the object is to escape our flesh by the mind. Okay? And they denied that Jesus came in the flesh. Well, he didn't bodily resurrect, because how in the world could you destroy a physical body? It only seemed to be crucified on the cross. It's all in your head. But John writes, and he writes in the book of Ephesus, hey, you put these teachers to the test, and you found them to be liars, didn't you? So this was a church that was doctrinally pure. If I were to describe a modern church of Christ, I would refer to the church at Ephesus. Modern church of Christ. However, notice what he says next. So let's go back to our text in Revelation chapter 2. And he said, I know your works, I know your patience, I know your labor, and you tested these false teachers, and has borne and has patience, and for my name's sake you've labored and you've not fainted. Nevertheless, boy, don't you hate to hear that word? But I got something against you. You've lost your first love. Now, what in the world had they lost when they lost their first love? Well, it could be simply their honeymoon with Jesus is all over. I remember in July of 1965 when I was baptized on a Wednesday night at Falls Mills Christian Church, not more than 30 miles from here, that when I came out of the baptistry, man, I tell you, I was on fire. How many people you think greeted me when I came out of the baptistry? Everybody left. I just so happened that there were a couple left, and I was going toward the back, and they turned around and say, "Hello, Rick," and I said, "Well, thank you. I'm glad to be a Christian." You see a lot of people come out of the baptistry all excited, but it don't take long for a honeymoon to be over. You know why? Because they watch everybody else in church how they're sad sacks. They were weaned on prunes and baptized in pickle juice and born on the dark side of the moon. And so it doesn't take long for them to settle down and just be like you, just warming a pew. But they've lost their first love. The honeymoon's over, right? It could be simply their love for Christ. Their enthusiasm as a new Christian died out pretty quickly, right? Or some say they could have lost their love for fellowship. Now, I'll be honest with you. I remember growing up in this area that we used to have youth rallies. I remember coming to Mud Fork as a 15, 16-year-old boy, and we just loved to get together. I guess at Christian Acres in my 44 years, this has been the thing that I've tried to do to get area churches to come together. That's why we offer things like the gospel sing. But it's like pulling teeth. I mean, we expect our young people to meet other young people in the church we're supposed to marry in the Lord, but we won't go to anything because, if we dismissed or transferred our services to Christian Acres, somebody might show up. Well, leave somebody behind to serve the Lord's Supper with the devotional if somebody shows up, and we ought to be able to fellowship with other Christians. But, boy, it's like pulling teeth. We used to have a free meal up at the camp, and we were lucky to get 150 people to come. Of all of our churches, we have 5,000 people in our supporting churches, and you can't get 100 of them together. Why? Well, I don't want to go to anybody else's revival. We expect them to come to ours. But we just don't like the fellowship like we used to. Now, if it's a typical Church of Christ where 2 to 3 together, let's eat. But fellowship more than just eating. Okay? I think maybe they lost their love for evangelism. Listen carefully. When anybody that walks in that door is suspect for being a false teacher, then they cease to be a prospect. You see, we treat them differently because, they could be a false teacher. They're suspect of being, and we don't even know them. Instead of being a prospect that we could win them when people come to visit us, then like I said it on the sheet up here, they're suspect more than prospect. And I can see the attitude. Now, to be honest with you, I hate that, try to pull up the other one up I gave you, I think. I had a whole thing up here that was on the fruit and the root. And it's not on this one for some reason. I really missed that. See if you can look the other one up and see if it's there. Revelation 2. I think I gave you 2 sets of those. And I hate that it's not on this. I just now realized it wasn't here. But if you want me to describe a modern Church of Christ, there is the root and the fruit. So I want you to see a tree. And a tree, of course, has 2 parts. It has